What's crackin', scallywags? Welcome to part 4 of our Bassbin build series. I'm your host Chaos Dubs, and in this video we're diving into the thought process and the adventure I undertook to design, create, and build our Bassbins, pick the amps, and choose the speakers we use for our bins, why we chose them, and why we will continue to use them into the future, despite some negative sentiment from some users. If you have ever been to one of our events, you know that we take sound quality seriously. With many years of experience behind our team and a longing for crystal clear, thick, authoritative bass that will have people swimming in its incredible power, we don't mess around. Tales are told and memories reminisced about the true clarity, punch, and power of this rig as the vibe resonates through the partygoers long after the party is finished and the appetite for more grows and spreads. We have gone back to back with just our small dual bin 5000 watt rig against a $50,000 Yorkville rig with exponentially more wattage, complete with 8 15-inch bass bins last summer, and the partygoers at that particular event were elated to hear our sound system after the Yorkville rig was disassembled. I clearly remember people saying things like, "Where was that sound system all weekend?" which was certainly an exciting thing to hear in comparison to something I thought would easily overshadow the capabilities of this small, quaint, and yet powerful rig of ours. Before we dig in, I just want to let you know this is not a sponsored video, although I sure wish it was. These speakers, amps, and any other products have all been purchased and tested directly by myself and my team. We are not selling anything to you today, and we have no attachment to or benefit from the companies mentioned making any profits. My team, myself, and our patrons and friends agree that these products are quality. Now into part 1, let's talk about the drivers. The drivers we are using are made by Rockville, and the model we chose are the RVW 1800 P4. These are a very economical 18-inch driver rated for 900 watts RMS at 4 ohms. I started purchasing, testing, and using these drivers about half a decade or so ago, and the main draw for me at the time was the cost and rated power handling. When I designed and built my first bass bin, my first Rockville driver was only $100 Canadian with cheap shipping, so it was an easy buy for a person dipping their toes into PA speakers and had little risk if the product was poor quality, as many reviews stated. This video will detail why I don't think those negative reviews matter, and I'm going to show these drivers' true potential. My original idea was to attempt to use my car amp to power the bass bin, which would be fed by a modified computer power supply. For those of you technically curious, the amp in question is an older model MB Quart Onyx 1.1000D designed to push 1000 watts RMS at 1 ohm, which would provide only approximately 250 watts to the driver, leaving it starving for power. Despite this lack of power, the Bassbin held its own in my basement for about a year before I decided to get a bit more serious about things and picked up a second speaker as well as a proper PA amp to run both of them at a much more reasonable power level to satiate the power-hungry beasts. This really gave the speakers a chance to shine as they could flex to their heart's content and reproduce that thick, fat bass we all know and love. And again, for those curious, the amp I chose is the Behringer NX 3000D, and it outputs 3000 watts, which is more than enough to run 2 of these drivers, with room to grow and expand to more. Using the parameters and specs from the Rockville speakers, I designed my original bass bins. So let's talk about how I chose my original cabinet design, how they performed, and why we eventually upgraded to our current bins. As some of you may know, when purchasing speakers, there is a list of parameters called the TS parameters, also known as the Thiel small parameters. This list of seemingly random abbreviations and numbers may not make much sense to the uninitiated, but generally these parameters are quite important as they dictate how the speaker resonates, how the air moves, the free air resonance or the FS, the internal volume of the cabinets or the VAS, the port volume, and the maximum driver throw in one direction, which is your X-max, and maximum driver throw before critical damage to components, which is your X-lim, just to name a few. Sometimes different brands don't include all of the parameters, but only the ones they choose to display, which can be kind of a pain in the ass, but sometimes it just is what it is. You can find more information regarding the original Bassbin design on my other channel in an older video that I will link here, plus some links to the software that I used to do the design. In this case, with the Rockville speakers, this is where some of the controversy begins. I'll show you here. This is one of the, let's call it an investigation into these speakers by someone trying to prove that they are not up to their rated specifications. There's a lot of math and really in-depth information here that only the most advanced builders will understand. I know I don't understand it all myself, but he may even be right about the fact that some of the parameters are overrated or incorrect, as we will discuss shortly, but this by no means proves the speakers are inferior. If you head to Reddit or any other forums, you'll see a plethora of negative reviews saying things like Rockville speakers don't reproduce any bass, or rigs with Rockville drivers have poor sound quality and are unprofessional, and things like nobody will want to rent these speakers from you. Simply, none of this holds any weight in my case, in my opinion, in my experience, and I'm going to tell you why. When inputting the TS parameters for these Rockville drivers into the speaker box design calculator, linked in the other video I mentioned a few minutes ago, it provides you with somewhat strange numbers that leave you with relatively large boxes and fairly low tunings, well below 40 Hz. As I mentioned in the other video as well, if you decide to use the TS parameters of the speakers, which I don't necessarily recommend and will elaborate on shortly, you should start by working backwards from the space you have and or the final desired exterior dimensions of the bins and inputting them into the program to see what your box tuning and other numbers will output as. Otherwise, you may find the recommended size to be quite outrageous in comparison to other popular bass bin sizes such as PK Sound, Yorkville, and other large brands. In my case, the original bins were nearly 3/4 the size of a standard dual 18 for only a single driver, and I had them tuned to 31.4 Hz, which, as I later learned, is unnecessarily low for the application. Despite this experiment not turning out perfectly, it was a necessary step in learning to do things even better and really letting these economical and well-built drivers shine to their full potential. In an indoor environment, the original bins worked well, threw plenty of bass, and had a reasonably clear sound, but seemed to lack a bit of the mid-range bass that highlights the kick drums and keeps the sound nice and glued together and full. This was further proved when we began to bring them into outdoor environments and really let them rip. But lacking that little bit of mid-range was not so bad because we had incredibly smooth, deep, and full low-end frequencies that radiated for quite a distance and created magic in their own way. In our experimenting and pushing the speakers to their limits, we ended up cooking one of them, but this was not due to the speaker quality or a design flaw necessarily. Simply, I believe it was due to inexperience, testing, abuse, and experimenting just from our end. The great thing about them, if you do blow them, they are among the lowest cost drivers available and are not too much of a hassle to replace. That will bring us up to the new speaker design and the road to how we ended up here today. This is part 2, the theory behind the new bins. When I was shopping for a replacement driver for the original bin, I decided to expand and try something different. So I placed an order for several drivers and began researching what would best suit my needs, fit my space, and do the required job as far as cabinet design goes, as well as would be unique and still within my capabilities to create. I figured it was time to really take this to the next level by building dual 18 line array cabinets, which would also provide the opportunity to drop the resistance down to 2 ohms and use all of the amps available power rather than just a fraction, thus giving us our first real perspective at these speakers' true capabilities. But let's talk more about the design of these new bass bins we have. In researching and searching for inspiration and designs, I scoured the depths of old forums, groups, Reddit, and any databases and archives that I could find to really begin to understand the theory on why people do things the way they do them and what the results in the end were in their testing. Parts of this led me to some of the original posts from the PK Sound guys on speaker design forums discussing designs and getting into drama with other speaker builders in the ecosystem. This is where I learned about PK's original design, which they say are lab subs, which is the style of the box design, and they were passive, non-powered, and requiring external amps just like our current rig is today. Some of these are still floating around in garages and basements and are a rare find if you ever do see them anymore. As my knowledge base grew, I ended up on a Facebook group known as the High Order Quarter Wave Society, where some of the most advanced and most relevant speaker designs and designers lurk, live, and work to better the live sound industry. They specialize in designing, innovating, and building what are known as Paraflex cabs, which are, for a simple explanation, a double horn style bin that is extremely efficient, very heavy and solid, and will reproduce incredibly low frequencies with extreme authority. After extensive research and discussions with the masters of this knowledge, I was very close to building Paraflex bins of my own when a discussion I was having concluded with Paraflex bins not being ideal for the drivers that we have and love, and thus removing this idea from the drawing board. Other reasons I decided against the Paraflex bins were the somewhat limited frequency range, often remedied by having several Paraflex bins with different size drivers and different tunings, and the extreme weight of the single driver cabinets being several hundred pounds per bin, depending on the driver size and Paraflex model. One of the most interesting things about this group and these bins are the fact that they are constantly researching, redesigning, and developing new versions to constantly push the capabilities of the sound rigs. This put me back on the hunt for the perfect box design, but I wasn't starting from scratch, as I had many more options lined up to re-examine and pick from. One of these designs was from a relatively well-known European speaker manufacturer, which fit the parameters that were necessary to both support the frequencies and drivers, as well as space requirements, and have a unique look that can be further adapted to add lights and more flair to the open real estate that is the front of a wall of Bassbins. Once I picked the design, I used it for inspiration, made some necessary and cosmetic changes, as well as slight dimensional differences, while still adhering to the internal volume to make things ideal for our application, and began to build our first Bassbin in the new style. Again, mostly as an experiment and to gain more knowledge. I'm not exactly sure what these new cabinets are tuned to, but I believe they are much closer to 40 Hz resonant tuning opposed to the 31 Hz of my old cabs, as they have much more mid-range punch and less overall internal volume per driver than the original design I was using, which again was based on the Rockville drivers. I could have run the numbers and reverse engineered the finished product to see the actual tuning frequency, but after testing these bins with the Rockville drivers that so many complain about, the tuning frequency I was aiming for and the TS parameters of the speaker itself became a whole lot less important to me all of a sudden. I was slightly concerned as I anticipated the first test of a singular dual 18-inch cab that the variables in the TS parameters and unknowns of the tuning frequency and minutia of the design I was using could cause a disappointing result and possibly poor sound quality. My fears were quelled fairly quickly as I had initially hoped. Early results were very promising and there was a much better, cleaner, and overall louder sound, in part due to the lower resistance at the amp and because of the box design. Using the exact same drivers, we experienced a wider frequency range, being audible and usable, and with a lot more authority, and keeping the same amp, the ability was unlocked to run twice as many drivers at half the resistance and double the RMS wattage. This was such a game changer that just a short time later, a second bin was under construction, just in time for the spring and summer season. As soon as we had the opportunity to test this relatively low wattage rig, about 3200 watts RMS including the speakers, we knew we were onto something here. Our small gathering turned into a proper party and the attendees were overjoyed with the incredible sound quality that we were putting out. But the best part is, my crew and I were feeling just the same. We nailed it and it sounded amazing, and we are picky. People were talking about this sound and were complaining about the sound quality at other events in comparison to these new bins for the rest of the season. Many couldn't wait till the next opportunity to hear them slam. If you have been to an AMP event and heard our system, you know exactly what I mean when we tout crystal clear sound, and we brand ourselves not from our own words, but from others as one of the best sound rigs around. That was basically my thought process and the story of how we ended up here today in such a position to be able to have 4 of these bins and a sound rig totaling just shy of 10,000 watts of RMS power that has people noticing. We are making waves. I realize that we are running relatively long here, but before we wrap this up, I want to cover my thoughts on why I think people have a negative opinion on and generally dislike the Rockville brand, and a few things that I like and dislike about them, other than what we have already mentioned. I think some of the main reasons people have a poor opinion of the Rockville brand are people being elitist and snooty and thinking that there's no other way than the brands that they are loyal to, and these types also being afraid to experiment in fear of getting mocked by their also ignorant peers, and in some other cases of people who are saying that these speakers are of low build quality or who have had issues with them. I believe a lack of understanding and a lack of experience play a really big part in this. If you're attempting to overpower, abuse, or otherwise not give a damn about your equipment, or you don't have the experience to properly set your crossovers, filters, and the like, or you're a shitty DJ who just redlines everything, then yes, for sure, you will have problems. Maybe, just maybe, the Rockvilles are a tad less robust than some of the overbuilt and unnecessarily heavy top-tier drivers available on the market, but if used within their rated power limits, at maximum efficiency with the lowest safe resistance, these drivers are going to do even more than many other brands as they are rated to 20 Hz on the low end and will leave any experienced basshead or audiophile very happy. As a side note, you will find some of Rockville's car audio gear, specifically the Punisher dual 2-ohm competition subwoofer, of which I also own, has almost exclusively glowingly positive reviews, with some even saying this particular driver may even redeem the company's name in people's eyes, and I'm quite happy with it myself. With that being said, let's wrap this up. I don't think Rockville is a bad company at all. Despite their shipping costs being high and causing unnecessary steps and delays, their products are solid, tough, and have a top-tier sound quality when compared to many other popular and large brands, and I highly recommend Rockville speakers. Don't listen to people who just want your money or just want to dissuade you from experimenting and possibly becoming competition to them on the market. If you're in the market for any speakers, subs, or other audio gear, buy Rockville speakers and thank us later. For now, take care and see you on the dance floor. Thanks for sticking with me through this deep dive, and please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. Check out some of these related videos from our many channels in our ecosystem. See you later!